Hello and welcome to Melbourne CocoaHeads, and it is November already, the last one, or our last normal presentation night of 2022. Thank you everybody for braving the rain and actually showing up. I'm glad some people did. The good news is you all get a free pizza, because we've got about one per person I think at this point, so might have to fight over the good pizzas or trade slices, see how you go. But either way, we did mess up with the ordering. That's my bad. I didn't order yesterday like I was supposed to, so they will arrive late. We're just gonna go for a break. Basically, as soon as they get here, everybody can grab a pizza and then we can keep going. Sweet, let's do this. So, in the spirit of reconciliation, Melbourne CocoaHeads acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. We have 3 fantastic presentations ready to go for tonight. Order is not quite correct. Derek is going to come up first and wow us with some mock servers, which is going to be awesome. And then Pablo will go after that, and then Anthony will bring us home at the end of the night. All of these should be really good. Definitely, if you're watching on the live stream or watching on a recording, feel free to skip past my boring intros straight into the good stuff. But if not, let's go through this. So just a reminder to everybody here and at home that we run all of our events under a community code of conduct. The full body of that code of conduct is online on that website, which is sort of cut off, but you can guess the last couple of letters, I'm sure. If not, just go to melbournecocoaheads.com and follow the links from there. But it's just basically to say, we want this to be a safe place for everybody, regardless of all of the things that we have up there. And if you do feel like something is not right, please feel free to reach out to myself or any of the organisers with the red dot. Or if you prefer to contact us either online or anonymously, there are forms on the website for that. A little bit of housekeeping if you haven't been here before, and if you haven't, welcome along. The toilets are back out the doors you came in, and then turn right after the elevators. The emergency exit is just near the toilets. If you hit the toilet, you've gone too far. And we don't do check-in anymore. We should probably remove that one. Nobody cares about COVID anymore, right? It's all good. The name tags, hopefully everybody has a name tag. If you don't, feel free to grab one by the door. I don't think I see anybody with the blue dots at the moment, but the red dots are for organisers. But if you do see someone with a blue dot, please make them welcome. How we run questions here, please don't interrupt the presenters unless they specifically tell you it's okay. If you can hold any questions you have until the end of the talk, that's great. It just helps the night flow a little bit better. But that said, sometimes they prefer to have that conversation style presentation, which is totally fine too. If you are watching online, there is a Slack channel called Meetup, where you can throw any questions you have on there. I will ask any questions to the presenter on your behalf, and that allows everybody then, regardless of whether you're here or at home, to participate as well. Now to our sponsors. Our sponsors we could not put these events on without our sponsors, and we've had another fantastic year with our gold sponsor, Itty Bitty Apps, and our 2 silver sponsors, DS and Deloitte Digital. Thank you to those for all their support for 2022, and we look forward to next year as well. So to other things that are on, the Hack Night is back on again and is on next week on Wednesday. Hopefully the date is correct. Historically, we have a good time with slides and dates here, but next week, Wednesday, back here at the Mantle Group office. Apparently it was really good last month, a good turnout. We run the Hack Night in conjunction with GDG and Flutter groups, so it's a great cross-section of people, and it is an alcohol-free night as well. So come along, bring your laptops, bring any crazy Xcode or Android Studio problems you're having, and maybe the people in the room can help you overcome those. Or if you're still learning, bring along a side project or something you'd love to help get started with. A bit more on the casual side, we have a drinks night on the last Tuesday of every month. I believe that's at Penny Blue still. Yep, which is just off Little Bourke Street in the city. Again, it's just a bunch of people who go to the pub after work and hang out, really, on a Tuesday. It's very casual, very relaxed, but it's a good way to meet people. If you want more meetups, more content, more things, some of our other partner groups for other cities, like Sydney, there is a Canberra CocoaHeads now as well. I'm not sure how active they are because I haven't checked since I've been back from leave. But there's also GDG in Melbourne, and there's a web meetup too. Yeah, go check out those if you're interested in them. I know Sydney CocoaHeads also live streams all of their events, so if you want more stuff, you can always watch theirs as well. How to find us? We have melbournecocoaheads.com as the main website, which has all of the links to everything else. We are primarily a Slack-based community these days. We used to be on a mailing list way back in the day. I don't think that's even exists anymore. But there's usually somewhere around 800 or 900 people on the Slack team. You know, it's active at various times. It's a great place to ask questions, get help if you're looking for that sort of stuff. And we will announce everything using at the Melbourne Cocoa Twitter account, generally. Bit more on Slack. There are a rough guide to Slack, I guess. The meetup channel is for tonight, generally. If you have any questions for the presenters tonight, you post them there. If you want to help out with the organisation of CocoaHeads, we have a volunteers channel, and we're coming to the end of the year, which means we'll be looking to do our regular or our annual organisers meetup, where we figure out what we're going to do for the next year, so it's a great time to get involved. We also have jobs channels and speakers channels. The hardest part of putting these events on is finding people willing to speak. So if you have an idea, please jump in the speakers channel and let us know. We're more than happy to help out with mentoring or reviewing slides or whatever you need to get started. It's a really great place, especially when there's only 30 people or so in the room. It's a nice, intimate audience to get started with speaking. Something else that's going on, the Ask Apple event is back on again next week. This is also run as a Slack-based thing where you can jump in a channel with some Apple engineers, get help on anything you're looking for. I believe they also have a 25-minute video option available. But yeah, definitely if you're stuck on something or you'd love to learn some more about something and finding it difficult to find information on the forums or anything like that, definitely sign up for Ask Apple. I was supposed to paste the URL on that slide, but I didn't do that. I'm sure you can Google Ask Apple and it will come up. Didn't ask if anybody had shipped anything this month. Does anybody in the room have shipped anything this month they want to talk about?
Mark shipped an update to family tree software.
Apparently Warwick shipped an update to iFamily, whatever that's called. Did he post about that in Slack? Yeah, go check out Slack for that. If you do have shipped anything, please let us know on Slack. Like, we're all here to help promote each other's work and the things that we do. Definitely let us know. And with that, I will get out of the way. Derek's up first. How do I do this? Go for it.
All right. I'll just do that before it starts making music. My name's Derek Clarkson. I have actually been to CocoaHeads quite a while ago. I haven't been for a long time. And for those of you who don't know me, which I'm going to assume is basically most people, I've been in the industry for quite a while. I have been doing iOS development since about 2009, 2010. Worked for a lot of enterprise, businesses, banks, insurance companies, small companies, so quite a bit in all of that. What I'm going to talk to you about tonight is not that, in a sense. It's related to that. So before everybody goes, oh no, another boring talk. No, what I want to talk to you about is actually quite a bit different. What I want to talk to you about is when you're doing automated regression testing. So it's actually sort of regression testing and automated testing. So people doing manual testing, people doing automated testing, and your options for doing that. Now, who's actually done stuff like this in an app? You know, and they've worked with servers and APIs and all those sorts of things, right? So your options for that sort of thing, and I've seen all of this done, come down to a few basic ones. And the first option that I have actually seen companies do this, when they do their regression testing, they do it against their live production servers, which is great from the point of view that you know the thing's already there. But from a testing point of view, it's not so good because obviously the data's constantly moving. And you've got issues like, well, you know, what you want to test might not be in production yet. Your new feature won't be there. So there's issues addressing that. The next option that I've seen people and companies do is they say, okay, well, let's go to QA, let's go to dev, let's use those servers. Again, this is great from a point of view if it's a live server. It's relatively simple to do within your app because you just redirect to a different URL. But it's also got the down points that obviously, again, the data is not reliable. The servers are usually way less reliable in production. And I've seen people pull a dev server in the middle of a regression test and just wipe the whole thing effectively. So it's not good. Third option that people go for, and in a lot of cases this is actually the best option when you're testing, is that you inject mocks into your app. Okay, so you build up a suite of known responses to known requests, a little bit of software, and you stick it into your app. The good point about this is it's fast, and it's absolutely reliable. You know exactly what you're going to get. And nobody can mess with you when you're doing it. But down points, obviously, you've got to create all these mocks. You've got to work out all your responses, all your APIs, and all the rest of it. And there's also the situation can arise where if you're dealing with an old code base in particular, or perhaps one that's, well, let's just say not well written, injection can be a real problem. It can be really hard to hack into some code. So the fourth option, and this is really what I'm talking about tonight, is using a local mock server. So what we're doing is we're running up a local mock server alongside our app and redirecting our app to the server. The advantages of that, obviously, is again like using QA and dev, you're just redirecting a URL. You're not actually changing your networking in your app at all. The perhaps disadvantage, if you want, is like injection. You've got to know all your mocks, you've got to know all your responses and all those sorts of things. So everything has its good and bad, but what I want to talk to you about tonight is this last option. And I'm talking about it because I've done a lot of it over the years, and particularly working for decent-sized apps with large server backends. We've had to build mock servers to simulate those backends for testing, for debugging, for all sorts of reasons. And in doing all of that, I came up with basically a set of criteria as to what we typically want. The first thing is that obviously we want such a server to be really easy to set up. You don't want to have to spend hours configuring obscure JSON files or whatever. The second thing is you want your server to be able to start up in a predefined state. Now this comes down to when you're doing CI, because in CI you've got a regression suite. You don't want it to be doing hours and hours and hours of running UI tests. You want it to be as quick as you can. One of the tricks to that is to be able to start from a predefined state. So if I want to test out a payment system for a cart, I want to be able to start my server with a cart already loaded, with a user already there. I don't want to have to wander around the app doing that as part of my test. Next one, predictable. Well, yeah, okay, we want predictable responses. That's a given. We want to be free from interference. Now, there's sort of several levels of interference with things. Obviously, there's external interference where somebody yanks a server out from underneath you, but there's also interference within your test suite. We don't want one test to be interfering with another. And preferably, we want to be able to run tests in parallel because Xcode supports that. So every test needs to be absolutely repeatable, randomly, parallel, without any interference from any other test. The last one is that we want to, I think this is last, I haven't got a preview coming, light and fast. Now, again, this comes down to the servers themselves. Whether it's your injecting mocks or whether you're using a server like I'm talking about, again, you don't want something that's going to take an hour to compile and then 20 minutes to get up before it's in a usable state. So it has to be quick. Excuse me. All right. Now, if you've got all that, as developers, you get a couple of advantages. First thing is that you can use your mock servers to simulate APIs that don't exist. And I've done this on projects when our iOS teams and our Android teams were actually developing ahead of the server teams. So we could use mock servers to simulate the APIs as we thought they were going to be, and then work with that. The other one is debugging and testing, primarily because there sometimes arrives a situation where you've got some obscure bug report or some weird piece of data that somebody's created on the production server or something like that, and you want to debug it. Using a mock server lets you quickly and easily do that sort of stuff rather than trying to go to a dev server and figure out how the hell did they get into that position. All right. About a month ago, give or take a bit, I found myself with a little bit of time on my hands, and having built so many of these things for clients, all the ones that I had built for various companies were all fully customized to that company's needs and the developer's needs at that company. So one of the things I wanted to do was to say, okay, I want to take that experience and I want to build something that anybody can use. And so I did have a look around. I went and looked at what was on GitHub and various other lists of mock servers on the web. And I went looking for a bunch of criteria. I went for something obviously fast to start. I went looking for parallel friendly for Xcode. Again, it has to be run from Xcode, so let's have multiple. Common languages. I didn't want any obscure languages or anything that people would have to learn or shift their head too much when they wanted to use it. So something that we all know. Easy to configure, obviously. RESTful, again, most APIs that I've dealt with are REST-like APIs, so it has to support that. It's pretty much standard. I popped in GraphQL in there because in the last sort of month, I've had a lot of people talk about it. So I went looking for it. A local process. Some of these mocks offerings that are out there at the moment in the industry, particularly the more commercial ones, tend to be websites. So I could configure a CI run with tests, but I've got to talk to a website to actually get my mocks. So I wanted something that, again, was local because I wanted to run multiple and quick. Request analysis. This is something that I found really useful in building these servers because time and time again, on a server point of view, you get a request from an app and you go, oh, it's got a payload. Right, okay, I need to understand that as JSON, or I need to understand that as a form or whatever it is. So I wanted something that would have some smarts and actually do some of that grunt work for me so I wouldn't have to go around deserializing things all the time. Xcode, obviously. I threw in command line. I've had a lot of time where we've been working alongside an Android team. And so we wanted to have a mock server that we could, in a sense, share. So something that can run from an Xcode UI test and something that can run from the command line for the Android guys or whoever would be great. Response templating, we often do it. Some of the simplest offerings out there just go, here's a URL, here's a piece of JSON, that's what you're going to return. That's the simplest kind of response that you can get. But sometimes you want it to be a little smarter. Like if you're simulating a cart, you might want to have a response where you go, well, here's a piece of JSON. I want to inject some other pieces of JSON to simulate the cart dynamically. Okay, you can assemble it from different files. You can assemble it from objects that you're going to serialize. You can assemble it from bits of strings, whatever. And file serving. Again, this comes down to what people want in apps. A number of apps use, for example, they use web views. Those web views are often looking for graphics, for bits of JSON and stuff like that. So we want a server we can redirect to. We can have a directory full of all this stuff on known paths, and it will just serve the files like a normal file server. So it can do that, a mix. So I've got a feeling that's the last one on this slide. I looked and looked and looked, and I've actually been looking probably for a couple of years for something like this rather than having to write custom ones. And I never found one that really satisfied all of this criteria. Particularly the parallel friendly was one that I was always looking for and never found. So, as I said, about a month ago, I said, okay, I'm going to sit down and take all my knowledge and see if I can build something. So I built Voodoo. Now, it was up until a week ago, admittedly, as you on the intro, it's called Simulacra. That was kind of my working title. I felt Voodoo was better for a number of reasons, but I called it Voodoo. What does this mock server do? Well, obviously it's fast to build and start. This is an SPM project. I can fire up Docker on this machine. Now this is your standard, well, I'll call it standard M1 Pro 10 core. Run Docker up in it. If I git clone Voodoo and then do a swift build from the command line, it takes it just over a minute to check out all its dependencies and fully build it. Now that is good from a CI point of view because you obviously don't want your mock server to be absorbing too much time. To start it, even from a command line, is actually about as fast as you can hit the enter key. Startup is lightning fast. This is built around very quick code. Parallel testing, what I did was I said, okay, I'm not going to get you to tell me, I'm going to get you to give me a port range. So this server, by default, starts looking from 8080 to 8090. And what it does when it starts up, it says, okay, I'm just going to go through those ports, and the first one I find that nothing is on, I'm going to grab it, and and that's the one I'm going to run on. And then you, in your test, you say, what port are you on? Right, we're in business. So that means basically when you're parallel testing, the first one gets 8080, the second one gets 8081, the next one gets 8082, and then we keep going round as tests start and stop and carry on. You can give it any port range you like. XCTest, obviously there's a full Swift API there to run it from XCTest. Everyone else is basically shell. The simplest thing it seemed to me was to use YAML as a configuration option. So you can create these tiny little YAML files that are sometimes as little as like 3 or 4 lines that say, when I see this API, I'm going to give it that response. Okay, and these files are composable in that you can have a file with just one response in it. You can have a file with a list of responses in it. Files can refer to each other, so you can have all different sorts of responses in one, and then create like these sort of files that say that and that and that and that is this scenario, and that and that and that and that is this other scenario, and things like that. So JavaScript is for dynamic. So this is a situation where you say, I want to look at this request that's coming in, and I might chuck back a bad request, or I might chuck it back an okay, depending on whatever my decision-making process is. Swift has the same thing. You can give it a single response and say okay, or you can use a closure, and it will let you decide on what sort of response you want to give. RESTful and GraphQL ready? Yep, good. Of course, the GraphQL, I will say, is very new, so I have not used GraphQL myself, so I'm still learning, and I'm still working on understanding how people use it, so that in part of the implementation will probably add more features to as time goes on. The request analysis part that I talked about earlier, there's a whole bunch of things that you can look at in a request that's coming in. For example, in a RESTful path where you have a lot of stuff with slashes and different parts of components of path, you can tag parts of that and say, grab that piece out of the path and stick it in a variable. And it will give you back a dictionary of all those things that you've pulled out of that path. It'll break up your query fields and automatically give them to you as a dictionary. You can say, I want the body as a JSON, and it'll go, right, I'll deserialize it for you and hand it to you. So all that sort of stuff that you would boilerplate out yourself half the time, I've tried to do it, say, these are the things that I want to do all the time, so let's just build it in. Fixed and dynamic responses. I kind of talked about that in a sense. Fixed is really simply where you just go, this is a URL I got, say OK, or say, here's a JSON file to return as a response or something like that. Dynamic ones are the closures and the JavaScript functions, and that's literally where you say the closure and the function get handed the request, they can look at it, they can say, oh, you know, he's asking for this or he's asking for that, I'm going to give him a bad request, I'm going to give him a JSON file, I'm going to give him a redirect, and, you know, whatever you want. It gives you that ability to make this sort of simple mock server that smart enough to be able to simulate what is going on your real servers, but not ridiculously smart. There's a balance act there. File serving, yes, we do that. You can return JSON, YAML, text, binaries, static ones that you've predefined, ones that you assemble out of stuff, it all there. And for templating, for assembling those responses, I've chosen a Mustache engine, which most people, I think, are fairly familiar with. They've all seen the double curly brackets. Mustache, if you've never gone into it any further than that, yes, you can inject values, but it can also build up data iterating over arrays. It's got all that functionality. It can refer to other files and just sort of mash them all together, so you can have parts of a response sitting in different files. So it does all that sort of thing. All right. As I said, Voodoo's a new name. And I was tossing around a couple of different names in Slack channels when I was sort of considering the renaming them. I wanted something that flowed a bit nicer. So the question was, why Voodoo? As somebody put to me, when you've got code like this, a simple test, the one thing that every developer really wants to write is this. Simple. And for me, that was it. That's the name. So I'm going to jump out now.
So we might pause there,
Yep.
Derek, just so we can grab some pizza.
Sure.
If you're about to go to demo.
Yep. Pizza.
Pizza, let's go. We're not going to stand around talking, eating pizza. Please help yourself to pizza, come back, sit back down. We don't want to keep people on the live stream waiting. Sorry, can I come back to you? Okay.
Yeah. Ready to go. I'll see if I can talk around the loud munching sounds that are going on from the floor. All right. So, what I'm going to do is, it's obviously, you know, I'm not going to run big regression suites or anything like that. What I'll do is I'll just basically show you through some of the code. And in this case, it's just a little iOS demo app that I just started building over the weekend, just to sort of like say, well, let's actually see how this thing integrates, and we'll work from there. So I'm gonna assume everybody's has run UI tests at some times, or has run sort of UI tests at some times, or maybe experimented with them. But typically what I've done, or what we've found in almost every single project where we've needed a regression suite like this, is we end up writing an abstract parent test case, which runs up our servers and does all that sort of business stuff that just every UI test runs. So now I'm hoping everybody can read that quite comfortably. I apologise if you can't. Is everybody okay with that? Yep, good, okay. People in the back, yep. All right, so if you're using Voodoo for something like this, obviously you want to import some Voodoo, some magic. And then typically in the setup pause, you would launch the server. Sorry, I'm actually in the wrong file. My bad. Sorry. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Abstract UI test case. This is the parent of all our test suites and the regression suite. So we would obviously do things like we would have a reference to the app in there because you need it to be able to talk to the app. And we would have a reference to the Voodoo server in there. There's stuff in here for, you know, configuring the launch arguments. Now, this is something done almost every single time. The best and simplest way to actually be able to tell an app to talk to a different server is simply just to pass it a launch argument. So in this case, I pass a launch argument of server, and I just ask my Voodoo server for a URL and just hand it straight across. Inside the app startup, there is a bit of code that goes, oh, okay, I'm going to look for an argument. If there is, great, I'll grab that server, and that's the one I'll use. So it's dead simple to write. There's a tier down here, and this is actually important not just from Voodoo, but for anything like this. For those of you who don't know, when test suites run, Xcode actually keeps all of them alive right until the end of the test suite. And for every test in your test suite, so even though they're all in one file, it actually creates a new instance. So if you don't deallocate Voodoo or any other server like this, you will find you'll rapidly run out of ports. So yeah, that's one of the things that's just unavoidable. You need to shut it down. In this case, you just deallocate it. It's done.
Tear down is a standard function.
Sorry?
Tear down is a standard function. You will
Yes.
just override it.
Yep.
Why can't you do it so? Is
Sorry, can we leave questions until the end, please?
We'll come back to that. Okay. Then we just typically, again, I just create a couple of different functions to support. One to launch the server, to launch Voodoo, set it up with any parameters and stuff that it may need. You'll notice here that we're giving it some endpoints. Now, endpoints is basically where you say, this is the URL you're looking for. This is the response I want you to give. It's a fairly simple data structure. Okay, and I've done it through a builder, so you know we can make it fairly nice. And the other function that we typically have is obviously is to launch your actual app. So when we're using that in a simple UI test, it just looks like this. We just basically in our setup for our test, we're saying launch the server, and we're giving it a bunch of endpoints that I've pre-configured, and then we run our test pretty much as we normally would. Okay, so launch server, always launch a server like this first, because otherwise your app might try and go and talk to it before it's actually launched. So pretty obvious. The endpoints we would often, again, there's a bazillion ways of doing this, and almost every client likes to do it completely differently and completely contrary to every other client. that's the way customers are. For simplest sake in here, I've got an enum, I'm just going to set up a bunch of statics and create the endpoints that Voodoo uses. Now, here's the first one. It's a config, and it just basically says it's a HTTP endpoint. It's looking for a GET. It's looking for that path. And when you see it, respond with an OK and a JSON body built from that data. So that's all I have to do it. It will respond. It will serialize that data out to JSON and hand it back to your app. So that's a pretty simple one. The book search endpoints, plural. It's giving back an array of them this time. There's a couple in here. The first one is, again, a very simple get books. And it's just, again, replying with just a JSON payload, 3 books in an array. Simple. This second one is where we start to get a little bit more sophisticated. This is this sort of endpoint you'll see on different servers in a lot of ways. We're doing a get, but this time we're doing a book. And you see here we've got :book ID. This is where we're extracting a value out of a RESTful path. So if the server sees /book/1001, it puts 1001 into a variable called book ID and then gives it to your response to examine. So we're doing a dynamic response because we're going to run a closure. Dynamic response gets handled the request. And in there we can look at the path parameters and extract the book ID out of it and then decide which piece of JSON we're going to return. So there's a bunch of things going on. You know, we're automatically extracting all the path parameters and all that sort of stuff. And we're also making a decision about what we're going to return, which is anything from a book through to a not found. So it's fairly simple stuff. A couple more I put in here. A cart, get cart. That one, again, is fairly simple. But where that one's a little bit different, it's another dynamic, and it's the reason because it's pulling from the cache. So Voodoo has a very simple in-memory only cache that allows you to transfer pieces of information from one query to another. So this is where this in carts are a great example of this. In the endpoint below here, put cart, what it actually does is it reads in some JSON from the request, extracts some data out of it, and then stores it in a cart in the cache. And then afterwards, if you do a get cart, you then get that information back. So it's a very crude, very simple simulation of a cart. Obviously, a real server would be a lot more going on, but for mocking and testing purposes, this works just fine. And that's the sort of thing you would use that cache for, and that's the sort of thing that you use these dynamic responses for. So I'll just run this. This is always the great part of it. I've got Voodoo running in what I call verbose mode. You can hand it a parameter that says run in verbose mode. And, okay, test is finished. When it's running in verbose mode, what it does is it gives you a list of all the endpoints that you've set up. And it also tells you when it receives a request and what that request was. So this is sort of aimed at the debugging point of view, where you've gone, oh, hell, I've typoed. Voodoo will turn around and tell you, hey, I got this request, but I didn't have anything for it. You've either typoed the Voodoo configuration or you've typoed in your app, but you'll get some feedback that says what's going on. So Voodoo will punch out a whole bunch of things, you know, if you've malformed your JSON or if you've done whatever. There's absolutely so many different things that could go wrong at either end of this situation. So adding more and more and better reporting is obviously a thing that I'm doing as much of as I can, because the more I can tell you, the faster you can debug. So these things are critical. So that's basically how you run Voodoo, just in a simple UI test. You can actually start it and I did it here in actually just this morning. I set up a mock circuit target and created this very simple application just running with the same endpoints. So this just allows me to actually run Voodoo in the background while I'm mucking around with my app. So when I actually run the app, if I run that, sorry, so I can just run that up. Right, so that's the server, it's up. And you'll notice that it does tell you the URL that it's on and all that sort of thing. Now I can just flick back to my actual app and run that. And if it ever comes up, which sometimes it doesn't like to, there it is. Make that one go away. So that's come up, and then I can just look back at the log of the mock server and I can see, you know, so it got the request for a config and that was it. As I said, this app is not very sophisticated. And again, when in the scheme, I just simply handed the URL through to the app when I launched it to redirect it. So yes, you can run that in Voodoo effectively in the background while you're debugging and use it like that. As it stops and starts very fast. I am thinking about easier ways perhaps of doing that, so I'm going to be looking into things like Xcode extensions and stuff like that as to whether that can help in some way, but I don't know as yet whether any of that will pan out. So I'm going to jump back just to here and then jump out again. As I said, I'll stop that and stop that. Voodoo can run from a command line. So I'm going to just get rid of a bunch of stuff here. Go there. So from the command line, it looks something like this. In fact, actually, I'll just back up a couple of directories first. You would typically just build it just with that sort of command, just swift build. That's just telling it to build a release version. You can build a debug if you want. I won't build it now because internet connections and stuff can be a bit hairy. But that builds, and that creates a command line program called Magic. It was actually going to be called Voodoo first, but I found a quirk in Xcode that wouldn't let me build a command line program called Voodoo and a library called Voodoo. I might have to report that, we'll see what happens. But for the moment, the command line program is called Magic because, well, why not? So, get back up into test files there. So, in this directory, this is kind of just a whole bunch of test data that I've been using and setting up just to sort of try out different things. I've got a bunch of templates sitting in the templates directory, and these are Moustache templates. If I go, for example, that's a very simple template that just says return an array and include these other three files, IAB1, IAB2, and IAB3. If I see what's in there, we can see that we've got the books JSON and the IAB3 files that it includes to create that response. So templates is like that. I've got, as you can see from the test configs 1, 2, and 3, the directory full of different configurations. And in fact, if I look at actually I'm thinking I might open scenario 1, might be one worth looking at. So this is what you would do if you're running from a command line, if you're dealing with an Android team or something like that. This is how they can configure things. This is a list of endpoints. These are HTTP endpoints. So you can see the first one here, we've got HTTP, we've got an API, we're saying what post to created/text. We're going to give it a 201 response. We're not going to bother with headers. The body is just going to be, response body is just going to be some text. That's it, gets pretty simple. The second response there says test config 1/get config YAML. That's just a reference to another YAML file, it just includes it. So again, this is about composing. The third one there is where it runs some JavaScript. This JavaScript is actually inline inside the YAML file. Okay, and you may notice it looks fairly similar to the closure. It gets two parameters, it gets the request and it gets the cache. And all that sort of same stuff that you have in Xcode for a closure, we have in JavaScript. You can examine all the different parts of the request and extract data out of it and return stuff and make decision making. The fourth one, again, it's just another get, just a one I was mucking around with. This just references to a JavaScript file. So if you want to keep your JavaScript responses, your dynamic responses in separate files, like .js files as opposed to embedded in the YAML, because you've got a fancy JavaScript editor that you like using, you can just do that. So let's get back to here. Go back a bit. This would be along the lines of what you would do. There's a few other parameters. There's quite a few different parameters that I've added to the Magic command line program. Always room for more. But at the minimum, you need to basically say, look, run it. Your template or your T is where your templates are for if you're using templates. If you're not, don't worry about it. You do need the config to see. Because otherwise you're starting a server that does nothing. So you've got to have some sort of configuration. It's started. It does not get faster than that. And when I was dealing with some of this, it was actually kind of fun in a way, because I was jumping around between the command line here and some YAML editors, and I'm using I don't know if you're familiar with POR, but I typically use POR, and just jumping around between these three things, just going bang and then start, stop the server, start and stop the server, change something, start and stop the server, and it was just so fast that it was just kind of really enjoyable to do. Get config, that's all right. So I need to go to, so yeah. Get config to okay. Why has that not? Oh, there is response. Yeah, I'm used to running POR at a much higher resolution, so I've got these things side by side. But yeah, basically, it just responds very quickly. So that was coming out of those Mustache templates, the book template, and inserted these three books from other files. So I guess the takeaway from that is what I've tried to do is make this quite flexible so that you can arrange things in the configurations and the files to how your team wants to work, rather than trying to dictate to you how it should be done. All right. I'll go back to Keynote. So that's kind of the demo side of thing. I thought I'd just quickly, because you're all developers, I thought I'd quickly through some of the technologies that helped me build this thing, because I didn't write it from the ground up. I'd be crazy to try that. Hummingbird is the first one. Hummingbird is the actual server itself. It's just a general server. It's built recently. It's built on Swift.io. It's very well built and very fast. So I wrapped Voodoo around that. Use that as my core server. JXKit gave me JavaScript core. Swift has JavaScript core for running JavaScript, if you've ever looked at that. But JavaScript core isn't available on Linux. So because, again, I want to be able to run in Docker, I want to be able to run in Linux, I needed a way to deal with that. And I found JXKit, which is basically a facade that allocates all that stuff in the background, and saved me a world of pain. Any codable? Anybody seen this one? No? One of the big problems with dealing with writing code like this is that you don't know what sort of data you're going to get. I don't know what data dictionaries, JSON structures, whatever you guys are going to set up and give me, but yeah, I've got to be able to understand it. So everything comes in as like any's. which of course I can't serialize and deserialize because any isn't codable. So any codable is a project that literally provides any with a codable option. And if you're dealing with unknown data that you've got to serialize and deserialize, that's worth looking into. GraphQL, that's quite a sizable project actually. I mainly use it to parse incoming GraphQL queries and break them down into an AST, and then I can look through them. Nimble, that's not actually in Voodoo, that's just for testing, but it's always a recommendation. YAMS is for reading the YAML files, for understanding those, so just deserializing those out. And finally, Apple's Swift Argument Parser, which if you're running a command line program, really good way to set up stuff like that. Okay, so that's it. That's where the project is currently, up on GitHub, if you want to take a look at it any time. I don't know where we're at time-wise, but I'm hoping we're okay.
Yeah, you want to take some questions?
Yeah, so any questions? There was a question down here first. I can't remember what it was.
Yes. Certainly don't remember. It was on the way. Now I don't have the slide.
All right.
Is it possible to run it in the actual, not thinking so much about the simulators, but actually on a real device? So, for example, if you're using AWS Device Farm or something like that, I want to test it on all the different iPhone sizes from the last 3 versions, blah, 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 and I want to run all my mocks for all the different
Yep.
experience. Possible to do that?
Absolutely. I did work on a project some time ago where we wanted to include a demo mode in the app that could run wirelessly. So we literally built these sorts of mock servers and embedded that inside the app. Really, you would just start it up just the same way that you do in a UI test. So just create a server, start it up, redirect to it, and things like that. So absolutely possible, absolutely can be done. The thing to watch out for, and I hit this at my last project, we originally started to do that, but then they had a massive data structure of files, of image files, because they use a lot of web views, and it increased the app size by 50 meg. So we sort of said, okay, we're not going to do that anymore, and we just ran it as a standalone server. So, but yes, absolutely can be embedded.
Good. Another question? No one else has a question?
Sorry, go for it.
Another question for you. Just thinking about, I want to make sure app config is only called once in my test. So I want to ensure that some rogue programmer hasn't written it so that every time a network request goes out, it's hitting app config again and again and again. Is it possible to do that?
So some sort of assertion.
Yeah, just at the end of the test, app config's only called once, or
Yep. You could. I actually, honestly, I have not thought about it from an assertion point of view, as in like mocking frameworks often offer assertions. But if you put a dynamic request in there, so rather than just saying, here's your config, JSON, okay, if you said dynamic, stuck a counter or something like that in the cache, you could then hit that and say, hey, look, it's more than one, what the hell? So there's certainly, this is very new in the sense, as I said, this app's, Voodoo's only really been built over the last month. So I've got a little list of things that I want to add to it. For example, one of the ones that I'm going to add to it is a delay option, so that any point through a test, you can say delay all requests from here on by X number of seconds, because that comes up, particularly when testing animations. That sort of stuff comes up. So GraphQL, I've added that one in, as I said. And speaking of GraphQL, you can match on if you know GraphQL, you can match on an operation name, but you can also match on the query itself. So you can actually put in a query and say, if any incoming query kind of looks like this query, then it's a match. So there's some flexibility we're building there.
This difficult.
Sorry?
You mean compared to SQL queries? Whether they match on
Yeah, GraphQL queries.
GraphQL,
Yeah.
That is not so simple.
Not simple, but it's kind of fun. Well, from a development point of view, it's kind of fun.
Just in continuation with GraphQL work you've been doing, have you considered typing your response with GraphQL? Because you know, basically from the client, you have sorry, you have a request that is typed, and you can easily find out what you're supposed to serve back. So how do you, is there anything or you're thinking about doing in terms of making sure your returning types are types?
Hadn't
Properly
thought of that.
typed.
Hadn't thought of that, but it sounds like a good idea. So please go there and stick it in a request, feature request or something, because I find that when you come up with something new like this, people are thinking, oh, I can do this. Oh, can we do that? So please put them in feature requests. If you've got any ideas or questions, please put them in, because some of them will manifest, some of them may not. Okay, I'm not going to promise the world, but yeah, I'd like to look at it because GraphQL is new to me, so I'm curious as to how people use it and want to use it.
Cool. Thank you very much, Derek. We might call it there.
Yep. Thank you.
Pablo's up next if you want to come and plug in.
All right. I'm Pablo Caif. Thanks for having me. So this talk is about my adventures navigating the new Swift UI navigation. So by day, I'm a principal consultant, and on all the other time, I fiddle with all these smart devices, you know, HomeKit stuff. I got a whole bunch of proper HomeKit devices. I got a whole bunch of devices that I've connected through Raspberry Pis using Homebridge. So I decided to build this up. I wanted to see the status of of all my devices in my house. My wife has all these plants and stuff like that, so she wants to know the humidity in different areas. So basically what I wanted to do is have this up using WidgetKit, show the status of all my devices. You can fully configure anything, pick any category, set colors, icons, whatever you want to do. And yeah, I was dedicating when iOS 16 got announced and the lock screen widgets got announced. I went straight in and trying to get it in and for the release of iOS 16. And for me, this is a great opportunity to learn stuff that you don't get to do in your day-to-day job, right? So you don't get to use full Swift UI. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, I don't know. But in a lot of cases, you know, you get legacy UI kit projects, get to work on Combine, just use all the latest and greatest. So one of the things that I really wanted to explore was the new navigation stuff that got announced in WWDC. So before going into the new navigation, let's do a quick overview of the old navigation. So the way that it works from the release to Swift UI up till the latest release, you would wrap everything into a navigation view, right? So it was like the unique piece that you would use if you wanted any sort of a UI navigation controller, right? So, and if you wanted a split view controller, then you would specify or add 3 root elements within that navigation view. And something that it caught me a few times was that the navigation link is coupled with the destination. And I'm going to explain a little bit later why it was causing me a lot of issues with that. And the problem with that also is that anytime you wanted to navigate, of course, you needed to have that navigation link. And there was no concept of navigation stack. So my goal of having this full Swift UI app ended up being like a 95% Swift UI and another 5% UI kit with, you know, UI view controllers and hosting controllers and a navigation controller on the top. So what were the issues that I was facing? So as I said at the beginning, there's no access to the navigation stack with the old one, which makes it very hard to persist any navigation state. Any programmatic navigation you want to do, it gets pretty complex. So if you want to do, you needed to do this sort of a weird workarounds or hacks to have this navigation link wrapping an empty view, and then using these binding variables to try to activate that. So any deep linking, which I'm using a lot for any of my widgets, right? So you tap on a widget if you want to see the status of something, or if you want to turn on a light or execute some scene, I need to do all the deep linking stuff and find and present views. So it was very hard to do it. Navigation split view, also pretty hard. So my app works on iPhone, iPad, and Mac Catalyst, because that's where HomeKit is available. It's not available on Mac directly, so you need to do Catalyst. But so all what was navigation split view had to be a UI kit, UI navigation split controller. And in terms of the destination, that caught me a few times, because when I was, for example, maybe allocating a view model to inject into my view, I discovered that every time if I had a list with these navigation links, my destination would get evaluated. The view would not get presented, but still that would get evaluated, causing my view models to be instantiated with some side effects that I didn't really want to happen. So at the end of the day, all that part of the app was UI kit, the internals also with UI. So the new navigation got announced. So basically now we got two main pieces. So we got the navigation stack for anything that is pushing views, kind of like a navigation controller, right? You can do the push and the pop, with an awareness of your stack, of the elements that you pushing in. The navigation link is a lot more succinct, and it's decoupled from the destination. And the navigation split view now gives you a lot more control within SwiftUI. So you can up to high columns, or maybe control the size of the columns, and it will automatically go into a navigation stack when you change horizontal size classes, and then back to a navigation split view if you go to the, for example, to the regular size class. So, has anyone adopted or started playing with the new navigation stack? Huh? Few. Yeah, so it's pretty easy to use. So it's basically you have your navigation stack and you pass as a binding variable the path. The path is just plainly an array of anything you want to have, right? And what basically you put in there is typically what you would be passing as your model object or your ID that you wanted to present in your view. So in this case, let's say I'm just passing strings, right? So I got my path in there. And when you specify your navigation links, you put in that value, what is going to be appended to that array. And the good thing is that you don't specify now the destination within the list, and it doesn't get repeated. Actually, you don't want to do that. You don't want it to get it repeated on every item of the list, because it also can have some side effects that might be undesirable. So you specify it outside of it, and that makes it a lot easier and a lot more succinct to control. And I'll show you how I use it in my app. So For example, if you want to do a programmatic navigation, which is something that I also wanted to do a lot, and I couldn't do with the old one, you just append an element to that array, and it will animate the push into the view control to the navigation controller. So the navigation split view, the way it works is it replaces this using multiple child views in this navigation view. You just basically have a set block for each one of them. And the programmatic navigation happens typically through binding variables. And as I said before, if you compress it and go in from regular size class to compact, it will switch into a navigation stack. This is how it looks like in the code. So basically, you can pass a binding variable to control the column visibilities. You can also control the column size. And in this case, having a couple of variables, one for that is controlled by the side view, which will determine what is shown in the content view. And the other one is the one that determines what's going to be shown in the detail view, right, which is controlled by the content view. So my list, I need to pass a binding variable to say whenever a navigation link gets selected, it will change this menu option, and it will set the value that is specified in there. And my content, which is the one in the middle, right? I got a handy function in there, which based on the menu option, it will render a different central view. And similar to the detail, right? Detail, whenever my selected detail changes, is going to render a different detail view. And if you're curious into how I'm doing the menu option, well, that's an example there, right? Same thing, a list with a selection, with a binding variable, which controls what's going to be displayed. So I want to tell you how sort of I organize everything in my app. So first, I want to give you a little bit of context of how I decided to organize my app. So look, I don't think there is the way to go or one way of doing anything. There's always a convenient way or something that works for you. So what I wanted to do in my case is not end up with a huge views, right? And have small pieces. And this is something that I always do on the side, you know, on the sofa when I finish the day. So what I did is I split my app in a sort of MVVM, if you will, but with routers. So my window group creates the main router, right? It's one of the variables that I got. That main router will instantiate my view models. Both of them are observable objects. And of course, if I need to do any call to any backend, or in my case, specific to HomeKit framework, I have a service that is interacting with that. That makes it a lot easier to test because I'm injecting directly into the view as observed objects. And when I want to present the reviews, basically the router is responsible to say, hey, this is the view that it needs to be rendered, and it shows that view. When you want to navigate to another view, again, responsibility on the router. The router is the one who knows all of that. So it's the one that it will eventually present my, my view. Or if I'm going into maybe another level, so what I didn't want to have everything in a big router, like with all my navigation state. So I got levels, different levels, right? So next level router, same thing. It will create its view models, services, present the view. And for visual context, the one on the left is basically when it's in compact horizontal sidecast, The one on the right is when it's on regular, right? So we got side view, content, detail. So when I try to refactor all my code and get it into using this new navigation, I started finding a whole bunch of interesting things. The first one is that in my case, if you look, the way my app works is you have all the accessories in your house and you select one and it displays details. So the characteristic firmware versions, switch on off, all that sort of stuff. You can also go into the scenes that you have in your house. And then you can go outside of that and get into the widgets, right? Into the widgets and edition view and all the stuff. So basically that means different types. And this new navigation stack says, yeah, no problem. You can actually use navigation path. But the problem with navigation path is that it doesn't provide you any visibility on what it is inside. You can only pop things out of it or push things in. And if you think into how my app is structured, I wanted to be able, if someone was using Stage Manager, for example, in the iPad, I wanted to go from the compact view with the tab bar at the bottom to the full 3-column view and maintain the navigation state. And I couldn't do that with the navigation path, which is one of the points that I got in there. And the other thing that I found that it was quite tricky is that the destination seems to be global. So, for example, in Swift UI, when you want to present a model view, you use this sheet modifier, right? And the problem that I had is I defined the same destinations or for the same type when I was pushing elements in the array on the modelly presented view. I would see sometimes animations happening behind on my root view controllers, right, or on my root views. So I got pretty interesting. So the way I found to overcome this was using the good old enums, which I think are great. For me, one of my favorite things in Swift. So the associated values allow me to have whatever is what I want to present. So for example, if I want to present an accessory, I got the actual accessory model, and that goes together with the enum case. If I want to present my list of scenes, I just use the scene. And if I want to present a particular scene, I will use I will pass the scene model. Then I don't put all my state variables in the view. I put them in the router, right? Because the router is the one who knows all the navigation state. So yeah, basically I have this published variable which holds the path, and the destination also lives in the router. So whenever different types are specified, I present different views. On the view, it looks like that. So just for the sake of an example here, I'm using a state object, my router there, and I'm passing into the stack the navigation path. And the destination is delegated onto the router. So now when using the split view, what I did is I came up with this handy protocol which allows me to expose as a binding variable the top or the last element in my path, right, in this navigation stack. So basically when I want to get the value of the variable, I just show the last element. So I just got one single source of true, right? The source of true is this path that I have defined. And this binding variable just exposes and allows me to append elements when I want to set values. It's a little bit more complex than that because you need to account for a few cases. But yeah, at the end of the day, that's the idea. What else? Yeah, so then when you want to access it from the split view, it's just as easy as in your list, I pass as my selection this select item binding variable. Navigation links as we do always, and then of course the detail is going to be shown by the router because it's going to be controlled by this binding variable which belongs to the router. Another limitation or something that is very tricky to do is execute any side action when you hit a navigation link. And in my case, I needed, especially when you want to edit a widget, I wanted to prepare some stuff. So what I ended up doing is using the good old will set, which works pretty well in this case. I know some people don't like it, but seems to be working well for me. And in terms of controlling the changing size classes, as you would imagine, I'm using this environment variable, which refers to the horizontal size class. And then I've got a defined environment variable, which is, I call embedded in stack view, which depending on which size class, it will say, hey, you need to embed your views into a stack view, or no, just use the regular list with a selection, depending on the case. So this is basically how it looks like, right? So you can create all these different widgets, different stuff in my house. And if you look in the, for example, if I try to execute a scene, it will run the scene and go back to the home screen. If I run the app, so that's running, for example, using Stage Manager. What you see in there, that's basically running in on a split view, but because it's not full size, it's just showing 2 columns. So if I make it into a compact horizontal class, you see how it shows the top bar on the bottom, and it's also maintained the actual state that it had, right? So now, for example, if I go back and then go down into the list of scenes, pick one, right? And then make it wider to go into the horizontal side, the regular, you see how it maintains the navigation state. And I can go back to what it was before. Yeah, and that is the third, the side view as well. And it's similar also, what I was showing there with the widget is you can also control which columns you're showing or not. And you can go from different types as well. Because of this protocol that I was showing, they have this associated type. So as anyone, I went through a whole bunch of different emotions and situations while working with this, but it's always a great fun. So I try to be a good citizen and open a whole bunch of feedback. Some of them are enhancement requests, some others are just bugs, right? So the one of them is simultaneous gesture doesn't work together with the navigation link. So if you want to have a simultaneous gesture, it completely overrides and the navigation link doesn't happen at all. If you're doing funny things like embedding lazy grids into lists, when you execute a navigation link, you get multiple. All of the elements in that get pushed, so you get like a whole bunch of stack push into your navigation views. The other one is, the one that I was showing you earlier, right? This is an enhancement request. It's not possible to execute any side action when you hit a navigation link, unless you do this will set. The navigation path which is the other one that I was mentioning, which is basically a type erased struct, which is pretty cool, but it doesn't provide you any visibility on what is internally. So my workaround is what I was showing in there, this using the enums. Then what else? Yeah, the navigation split view detail. This is a publicly acknowledged bug, and I hit that one fairly quickly. Yeah, when you try to change stuff, in a lot of cases, it completely ignores the updates on the detail. So what ended up working for me is wrapping the detail into a zip stack and using an UUID as an ID for some of the elements. That's pretty much it. So as a summary, yeah, I think the new navigation stack and the navigation split view are actually great. They're really good for programmatic navigation, and I think in a way they're pretty much taking away the need of using UIKit as your skeleton. If you need to access items of different types, enums are great for that, and you can use the horizontal size class to decide when when views in the iPad are being resized, what to show or what not. And the binding variables can be great to sort of translate or expose that little bit of the navigation path when it goes into a navigation split view. So that's it. Questions?
Thank you, Pablo. Hang on, go question.
Can you control the animation when you click an item? How is animated the data view, for example, or?
So that goes into the navigation link, right? So if I go back into, let me show you. Let's see if I can go into the one that I was showing that. It's probably, so it's hard to see.
Just specify a type of animation. That's it. You don't need to program animation yourself. You have you program normally with UIKit. You specify a type of animation, it does it. You know, you don't need to program normally. But anyway, this is not.
Sorry, I didn't get what you.
So you don't specify the animation style.
That's by default.
On
It's
a
a default transition.
On a default transition, you don't
Yeah, it
specify.
depends what you're doing. Like
There's only thing, I don't.
there's a default transition between like navigation destinations.
And you can't control it.
Might get you to take that one offline afterwards.
Okay. Another question: is this menu content and details? Is it standard for split view or is your choice on?
It's just a list. So the one that you were saying on the side view, the menu on the side view, yeah, it's just a list.
It's just level hierarchy. The
Yeah,
menu is the top
exactly.
level,
So you fully control it depending on the blocks, right? So you have the block on the top, which is the main side view that you have. Then you have the content. So whatever view you put in there, which you can control with these binding variables, goes into the content, and in the details, whatever you specify in there, we're gonna get rendered.
Was there any other questions? No, seems not. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to talk about Dynamic Island and Activity Kit and to experience we had building some of those widgets. So before we start, my name is Anthony Mitaz. You can find me on Twitter and GitHub. I don't tweet, or I'm not very active, but if you have questions, ping me. What are dynamic widgets? So can you put your hands up if you don't know what's a dynamic widget? Oh, sorry, not a dynamic widget, dynamic island or activity kit. Yeah, so it's you can see it on the screen here. For example, it's one of this stuff. If you have a shiny new iPhone 14 Pro or Pro Max that has the new the new stuff, Apple did this really genius marketing things that they made something that wasn't very shiny with those new widgets, basically. As always, they always convince me to buy a new phone. And so there's a lot of variations of things you can do with the Dynamic Islands. So if you Google Apple and Dynamic Island, you can see they have a really good promo video on TV at the moment for anyone that's still watching TV. And it's all sort of widgets you can do. So in order to understand what they are, etc., there's nothing better than building one together. That's what we're going to do right now. So I've got an app here. So it's just a normal app that was already bootstrapped, and we're gonna do the work that is required to add the new widgets, dynamic island widgets. So the first thing you have to do is that you have to. Oh, I'm not sure if I can make that screen. I cannot really make it bigger, but we're just gonna go with the flow info. So the first thing you have to do is you have to add this new property to your property list. You search for supports. That's of course not going to work. So I've got it here. So the first key you have to do is a warrant key that you have to say my apps or you or whatever app support live activities. So the first thing you have to do. If you forget to do this, Xcode or your app won't complain, but you won't be able to start activities. First thing you have to do. Once you've done this, you add a new target to your applications. You search for widgets. So widget extension, you're going to add a new extension. You name it, whatever you want to name it here. I've got something. So you name your widget, however you want it to be named. You create your new targets, etc. So now you have a widget or widget extension. That's what they call it. So if you go look at your app, it has created a new folder with some widget, there's bundle. So here we only care about the activities. We don't care about the normal widgets. So we're just going to remove these widgets. It's not necessary for us. Here, so we can delete these two things. Here, move to trash. Yes. And so you end up with this widget bundle that has live activities, and it has some sample code here. I'm just going to tweak some things. I've prepared a pod. I'm still using CocoaPod with some stuff that's already ready. So I already have an activity that is done there. I just have to link my CocoaPod together. So it's just going to take a little while. Here, pod, and here. Link my pod. You don't have to do this when you do this, just for my demo, basically. Okay, so here, pod, mobile pod. I'm just updating my pod. Does anyone still use CocoaPods? I remember what it is. I think Sean might remember.
What are you saying?
Yeah. Also, Aria still use it. Yeah, it's great. It works. Okay, look, so we're just running the pod, and then we're gonna rerun the project. So now we're gonna start the app. So Yes, we're going to start the app. So we have a very small sample app that we have here that's going to let us start those activities, and you're going to see what they are. While this is building, we can have a look at what we got here. So we got a bundle, again, and those live activities that are very, very simple. So in order to build live activities or dynamic widgets, you have to use Swift UI. So there is no other way, Swift and Swift UI. But it's very, very simple to understand and to grasp. So you're just going to have a look at if things are still building, still using Objective-C as well. Still building.
Bump the text up a little bit, just on the Xcode.
Yeah, if I know how to do it.
Control plus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is it better now?
Yeah.
So you can see, so you have all sorts, you have a leading, trailing, bottom, etc. We're gonna see some slides, but I'm just gonna show you one. So now we have our sample app here that is starting. And that's an app that lets you buy all sort of things. And for example, when we're buying stocks for people, a stock isn't something you can do live. So sometimes, for example, the market might be shut in the US. So when you're buying, we want to start an activity to remind you that we're buying some stock for you, but it's still in the progress. So we're thinking those widget stuff are a really good example. So for example, when you purchase here, where does you tap purchase, and when you back run your app, you can see these little things moving. So you can see a L and a T here. And when you tap on it, you can see more stuff there. Yeah. And as well, so that's you basically your dynamic island starting a new widgets. And as well, you have a widget here for people for the iPhone Pro or for the non-iPhone Pro people as well. So everyone's going to end up with a widget here as well. And so you can dismiss it. So if you don't dismiss it, the widget stays there. So if you don't dismiss your activity, it stays there. And if you dismiss it, it goes away. Okay, very easy. And so now we're going to tweak something on this widget. So we're going to change to hello. I'm going to restart the activity again once more here. I'm going to show you there's a small hello here. It's called, no, we're going to search for bottom here. Oh no, so let's take this one, hello. For example, the hello here is the one that is not here is the one that's in your lock screen, for example. So we're going to take these widgets and tweak it here. Small things, just going to do this, prepare everything. So we don't mess up anything, I don't care about the alignment. So now when we restart our app, just have to recompile, it's going to start consuming the value. So basically what it does is it looks at the value, the stuff that you're defining in your widget when you start the activity. And you can see where we start the activity. I can show you this actually. When you start an activity in your pod file framework, no, in development pods, look at this here. That's the code to start an activity, for example. So you just have a small activities of a certain type, and you give it attributes, etc. And that's exactly what it does. You start these activities, and then it gets converted to Swift UI. So now is the app. Oh. Where? Oh yeah, thank you. So here, so we change, so we're going to consume the value, and now we have another button that's going to update your activity. So the second part, why things are building, we can look at the second part where in here as well, you can update your activities as well, and it is where you can keep your activities around, you can store it in a variable, etc., or you can iterate through your app to say, hey, give me all the activities you have and update them with a new value. So here you define a new value, and then for example, when I go back to stock, I make sure I start my activities. It's there. it's there, and you can see here it still says 10. Okay, your value is 10. No, things have changed. If I tap there, I go back there, and I go back to this stuff, and you can see your value is 20. So Apple made this thing that is very, very easy to work with and very simple, and it's beautiful, and etc. So it's very, very interesting, and has a lot of use case. So I'm going to go back to the slides. So we've built a widget together. That was very nice. And you can see, again, it's very easy as well. So same for normal widgets as well. So when you want to communicate back with the app, so for example, here, I've got a timer. You use linking, so deep linking as well. There's no other solutions, unless I don't know. But so you use deep linking to go back to your app when you press a button, for example. It's very easy to do deep linking with SwiftUI as well. And so now I'm just going to talk about the experience we had doing it. So it's still very early. So our app is in production, but hasn't gone to production with the widget yet. For us, our use case, for example, we think that 8 hours. So you can keep a widget active into Dynamic Island for up to 8 hours. So basically, you can start and stop an activities. If you never stop the activities, it will stay into Dynamic Island for up to 8 hours. And then it will disappear and go back to your lock screen for 4 more hours. But for example, for us, we wanted those islands to stay, or those widgets to stay active for more than 8 hours, etc. As well, you can update, so you can update your widget from your app by updating the activities, or you can use push notification as well to update your widgets. The problem is that there is, if you want to use a third-party provider to use remote notifications, it's a different way to do remote notifications. You get a different token. And not many SDK out there have a way to do to deal with these new tokens. What you have to do, you just write an API that talks to your provider, that you provide them the token, and you have a new payload format. The payload is slightly different as well when you do a push. You can see this, I don't know where, it's somewhere else. APS, I've lost it. Yeah, it's fine. So the payload, so the push notification payload is slightly different as well. So you have to be aware and just use, if you use a third party, make sure to support custom attribute, like content type, etc. The fact that it falls back, so if you don't have a shiny font with the Dynamic Islands, it will still fall back to a widget, so it's still useful. Our experience was the Apple documentation was very good. There are a lot of tutorials, so I really like this one, for example, that explain you everything you need to know about widgets. You know, what's the leading, trailing, and all the varieties from Apple. It's really, really good. And it was my first time using a SwiftUI, and it was nice. And WidgetKit as well was very super easy to understand. So you can see sometimes as developer we don't like abstraction, but this in occurrence is a very easy abstraction that let me do some SwiftUI and learn about this stuff very easily without having to know pretty much anything about SwiftUI, etc. Is there any questions so far? Yeah.
What controls what dynamic island representation is at the top? Like if phone call comes in, so it's going to take, you know, presence of the dynamic island now. Does it then go back to your version? Is there a stack?
So there's a stack basically. So from this screen here, that's a very, very, very good question. They've thought of this from this. I don't have a screen here.
You did have it on one of the, I think the tutorial.
Oh yeah, so this one here, for example. So you can see here, I've got my directions activity, and here I was listing some music on Spotify that has a widget. So there's a stack. So your stack goes smaller, and it can go small to the left, expand and stuff. So they will stack them to a certain extent as well. It's a really nice system, but there's not that many apps that supports it, and I never really had more than 2 or 3 widgets running at the same time.
There any other questions? Doesn't seem like it. Did you have more?
Yeah, so just because GraphQL was mentioned, I just want to do a shout out that if you're interested about GraphQL, I know iOS is coming to learning GraphQL and liking it or disliking it. There's a meetup that's restarting this Thursday as well called GraphQL Melbourne, where we discuss everything GraphQL, and it's has some really nice talk there as well. That's it.
Cool. Thank you very much. Hooray! All right, that's us for another month. That's actually us for 2022 as far as presentations go. So a big thank you to our presenters tonight, to Derek, to Anthony, and to Pablo. Round of applause for those guys. A big thank you to Itty Bitty Apps, to DS, and to Deloitte Digital for looking after us throughout 2022. Round of applause for them too. Reminder, Hack Night's on Wednesday next week. The CocoaHeads Drinks Night is on the last Tuesday of the month, so the 29th this month. We will be having a meetup in December. We usually run end of year party sort of thing in conjunction with GDG and a couple of other groups. Haven't finalised the details of that yet, but once we have, we'll announce it via Slack and Twitter like we always do. So look out for that. Now we go to the pub. Follow the crowd if you're coming to the pub. We just go up to the Mitre 10, which is just a couple of blocks up that way. It's usually pretty relaxed sort of thing, but other than that, thank you very much for coming. Mitre 10, I did say. There's no Mitre 10 in the city either, so Mitre Tavern, sorry. Thanks, Baz. I clearly need another drink.